What if the traditional schooling system actually trained you to learn the wrong way? You spend years absorbing what someone else tells you is important, watching endless blank books tumble off a conveyor belt into an abyss. And that leads to a very specific modern symptom. You buy courses, watch video lectures, and read densely packed nonfiction, only to realize you have forgotten almost all of the material within 2 weeks. It is easy to blame a lack of personal discipline for this memory gap, but the actual culprit is a deeply ingrained habit from those school years, passively absorbing information just to hit a deadline or pass a test. To build real understanding from scratch, you have to replace that passive habit with a systematic, active approach. You have to intentionally construct knowledge so that it becomes a permanent part of how you think. If you simply consume content and hope something sticks, almost nothing will. The skill of teaching yourself is not something you are born with. It is a precise mechanism you must intentionally build. The first step in this protocol happens at the very start of the pipeline. Most people measure their progress by pages read per day, but the actual metric of success is whether the text managed to change your thinking. Before you read a single word of a book or an article, write down one specific question you want that text to answer. Doing this forces your brain to actively search for an answer and filter the incoming data, rather than just moving words across your eyes. This diagram illustrates what happens when you finish reading. You take 10 minutes to write, but you do not write a standard summary. Instead, you filter that raw data into 3 distinct columns: what surprised you, what contradicted a prior belief, and what specific actions you will take next. Categorizing new information into these specific buckets forces your brain to connect disparate concepts. You're forcing the material to integrate with your existing mental models. Reading without an initial question and a strict post-reading filter gives you the feeling of progress, but it is merely the illusion of learning. Once you fix how you read, you have to address what you choose to study. The quiet mistake most self-learners make is consuming a little bit of everything: business, psychology, history, leaving them with a shallow layer of unconnected facts. A broad approach morphs into a concentrated column because you commit to one subject for 90 days. To execute this, you construct a pyramid. Trace foundational text downward to the wide base of primary sources, reading the expert's actual words. Once you reach that base, you introduce a stress test. You find 3 books that actively argue different positions and disagree with each other on the same core questions. Your objective here is not to decide which author is right. Your job is to parse exactly why each person believes what they believe and what specific evidence they are using to construct their logic. By the end of those 90 days, you will know more about that single topic than 95% of people you meet. This concentrated depth builds a sophisticated level of competence that you can actually build upon. Data collection is only half the process. To ensure the concepts actually stick, you must test your understanding by explaining what you just learned to an absolute beginner. Explaining a concept to an expert is easy, and it creates a false sense of security. An expert allows you to lean on shared vocabulary and skip the foundational logic. When you translate complex ideas into very simple language for someone with zero context, every single gap in your knowledge shows up immediately. To capture these gaps, you need a centralized workspace, like the digital document interface shown here. This is a thinking document. It replaces standard note-taking apps by housing your actual ongoing arguments, debates, and living thoughts about the material. Knowledge that lives exclusively in books or standard highlight reels is simply borrowed, but the knowledge you aggressively wrestle with inside a thinking document becomes permanently yours. Even if you follow every step of this pipeline perfectly, there is still one critical point of failure. You can do the reading, pass the stress test, and build the document, yet still forget the material in a month if you do not immediately put it to use. This diagram illustrates the 48-hour rule. The rule is a strict mandate. You must apply at least one element of every newly learned concept within 2 days, flowing into an action node before the timer runs out. These do not need to be massive shifts. It can be a micro-application, like using a new writing tactic in a daily email, or testing out a psychological framework in a routine conversation. Consistent, real-world application is the exact mechanism that separates people who are merely informed from people who are genuinely educated. As the original source states, informed without application is just expensive entertainment. When you stop passively consuming and start testing your knowledge in reality, you finally transition into a dangerously educated mind.